Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome back to Newstos. And it's been a pretty busy week in the gaming world, especially for Nintendo, which has been very active over the last 24 hours. They did talk a little bit about the Nintendo Switch Successor, interestingly enough, that maybe has sparked some rumors and speculation. So we're going to talk about that a little later on the video, and then also we are starting to hear that Xbox might have some presence at yet another major event. Of course, they do have the Xbox Bethesda showcase next month on June 12th, but it is starting to sound like they have some plans for a later time, and this could be telling on their upcoming strategy, so we'll go over that as well. Per usual though, if you do find yourself enjoying this video, go and hit that like button below. It does help out the channel a ton, and while you're at it, go and hit that bell notification and subscribe button as well. That way you can keep up to date with all of the latest gaming news. Besides all that though, let's just go and jump right into things, starting off with the Nintendo Indie World, where they showcased 20 different independent games. Now, unfortunately, I do have to break your hearts real quick here, but Hollow Knight Silksong once again was absent from this event. The mystery of Hollow Knight Silksong's release date continues on. However, there were still some pretty interesting games here, which I'll kind of go over some of the different highlights, and then here at the end, I'll just give you a complete list and all of the release windows for each game. The first game that really caught my attention here, though, which I think is actually the highlight at this event, was Another Crab's Treasure. Now, this is supposed to be a Souls-like game, or as they describe it, a Shells-like, very clever on their part, but overall it seems like a challenging, but also charming Souls-like type of game. There seems to be some 3D platforming here. You being a crab, you can also swap your shells out for different types of armor. It's supposed to be challenging, and just overall, I think it looks like a very fun game. The only unfortunate part about this one is that you're gonna have to wait until 2023 to play Another Crab's Treasure. Another game here, though, that I thought stood out was Electhead, and luckily this one's actually going to be releasing much sooner, being this summer, in fact. This is supposed to be some type of puzzle platformer where everything that you touch is controlled through electricity. I really like the premise of this one, and I think that it definitely looks like one of the better puzzle type of games that will be releasing sometime here soon, so definitely keep an eye on this game. And then last but not least here, the third one that really caught my eye was Gunbrella, and the title alone is pretty much going to describe what this game is. You control a character that has a gun that's also an umbrella. You can shoot things because, well, it's a gun, but then it has a lot of umbrella type of attributes, so you can float around, you can attach yourself to zip lines, and the combination here looks like it's going to be a lot of fun. I also really like the art style for this game, though again, unfortunately, you're going to have to wait until 2023 to play Gunbrella. Those to me, though, was the three main highlights at this event, but we got plenty of updates on other games such as Ooblets. That is a game that a lot of people have been paying attention to. It's this weird but charming combination where you collect monsters, but also has farming simulator type of aspects to it that will be releasing this summer, so go ahead and mark your calendars for that. Tabs is a pretty popular game that's been around for a little while. That will now be heading over to the Nintendo Switch again this summer. And then a game that we actually talked about at the Xbox Indie event earlier this year, being Cursed to Golf. Now, this again is an interesting combination of a roguelike game, but with golf. I actually think that this one looks quite interesting, and that one will now be heading over to the Nintendo Switch as well. So got some pretty cool updates there, but let's go and take a look at the full list of games that was announced here. Again, Ooblets will be releasing this summer, Batora Lost Haven, that's releasing this fall, Electhead is coming this summer, Soundfall, this one actually looks pretty interesting as well. It's a dungeon crawler, but a rhythm game at the same time. That's actually releasing today, definitely check that one out. Wild Frost, which is a card game, that's this holiday. Tabs, again, that releases this summer. Gunbrella's coming in 2023. We Are OFK, that's releasing this summer. Silt is coming in June. Mini Motorways is coming today. Wayward Strand, which is this adventure type of game, that's coming July 21st. Cult of the Lamb, that's 2022. Another Crab's Treasure is in 2023. And then they revealed a compilation trailer with various release dates, which I will leave in the comments below, including One Shot World Machine Edition, Gibbon Beyond the Trees, Idle Manager, Card Shark, Cursed Golf, A Guidebook of Gable, and then Opus Echo of Starsong. So there you have it. That would be the full event for Nintendo Indie World. Next up, it is starting to look like Capcom has some big plans for 2022 and maybe even into early 2023. According to them, they are set to release multiple major titles by the end of their fiscal year, which will be March 31st of 2023. Now, we don't know exactly what games are included here just yet, but I mean, we do know that Monster Hunter Sunbreak's expansion, that is actually scheduled to release on June 30th. They also had the Capcom Fighting Collection, so those are some pretty interesting releases there. But for them to very specifically say that they have multiple major releases planned for this fiscal year, that does make you wonder what else they have planned. Now, we do know that Capcom has a couple of games planned for 2023, such as Exoprimal, Pragmata, though we don't really know much about that game just yet. And then you have Street Fighter 6, which has yet to receive a release date as of this moment. That would definitely be considered a major release. Street Fighter 6 obviously is one of the biggest fighting game franchises of all time, and as of this moment, even though they have announced it, we don't have an exact release date. Now, maybe it could release by the end of 2022, or maybe even possibly in early 2023. And well, interestingly enough, they did say that we were going to hear more about this game this summer, so we probably won't have to wait too long before we get the official announcement. Now, another game that I think maybe Capcom could be referring to here would be Resident Evil 4 Remake. Now, it's no secret that this game is in development, but there's also a lot of rumors kind of indicating that we are going to get an official announcement sometime here soon, which could mean that this game is set to release sooner rather than later. Of course, nothing is confirmed just yet, and this is all just speculation on my part, but I wouldn't be surprised if we do get an official announcement sometime here soon for Resident Evil 4 Remake. Either way, though, again, it definitely seems like Capcom has some exciting plans for the next year. Let's go and talk about Nintendo, though, as there's been a lot of discussion over the last 24 hours regarding a Nintendo Switch successor. Now, this topic tends to pop up during these fiscal year reports as they're asked all types of questions about a Switch successor, and this year really was no different. The Nintendo president, Shuntaro Furakawa, was asked during a Japanese investor Q&A about the Switch 2, and a couple of statements that he made was very interesting that caught the attention of Nintendo fans out there. So we'll kind of talk about both of those today, and the first of which is just kind of more speculation on when that Nintendo Switch successor will release. This is actually a no comment, more or less, but as you can see here, Nintendo President Furakawa declined to comment today when asked whether it plans to release a new Switch hardware this fiscal year. 2 years ago, when it didn't release a Switch hardware, he clearly said there won't be. So the fact that Nintendo declined to comment about new hardware releasing this fiscal year has caused a lot of rumors and speculation that they will release new hardware this year. Though I will say for myself, I'm not really going to read too much into this. I mean, I'm never going to completely rule something out, but I'm going to stick with my prediction that we're not going to see a Switch successor until 2024 at the earliest. I really don't think it makes much sense for Nintendo to release a new console anytime soon. And the reason I say, well, there's actually various reasons I say this. One, the Nintendo Switch is still selling extraordinarily well. Then you also have some major titles releasing over the next 12 months, including Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Then you have Zelda Breath of the Wild 2. Both of those games will prolong the life of the Nintendo Switch even further. A lot of people, in fact, will probably go ahead and upgrade to the Nintendo Switch OLED because of those very specific games. So I do expect the Nintendo Switch to continue to sell very, very well into 2024. And then last but not least here, and this is probably what I should have led with, is that we're still dealing with a global chip shortage. I don't know if Nintendo's going to want to risk releasing a brand new console during a chip shortage while they already have a very successful console that is still selling, again, very, very well. So I'm going to stick with my original prediction. Some of you all might not want to hear it, but I really don't believe that a Switch successor will come anytime soon, and I still believe that it's at least 2 years out. So again, I'm not going to read too much into this no comment here, and I think it's just kind of fans grasping at straws by this point. Now, as for this other statement here, this is actually what I found to be much, much more interesting, and that was them talking about a transition for a Nintendo Switch successor. You can actually take a look at Furakawa's very lengthy statement made here, saying, "Unlike the past, we continue to have a large variety of games scheduled to be released even beyond 5 years of release. This is because the Nintendo Switch has had such a smooth launch, allowing us to focus all of our development resources on a single platform. However, the question of whether we will be able to just as smoothly transition from the Nintendo Switch to the next generation of hardware is a major concern for us. Based on our experience with the Wii, Nintendo DS, and other hardware, it is very clear that one of the major obstacles is how to easily transition from one hardware to the next. To help alleviate this risk, we're focusing on building long-term relationships with our customers. While we will continue launching new software on the Nintendo Switch, we will also provide services that also use Nintendo accounts and other IP outside of gaming software. We intend for this to help build a lasting impact with our customers." Now that is very interesting, as they are very aware of what happened after the insane success that they had with the Nintendo Wii, after the insane success that they had with the DS. They followed that up with much less popular devices in the Wii U, especially with the Wii U, which was an abysmal failure, and then the 3DS, which while had some success, it wasn't nearly as successful as the DS. So they do have a right for concern here, but I think that there's a couple of things here that they can do to kind of avoid some of their past mistakes. One would be less confusion. As we saw with the Wii U, that particular console caused a lot of confusion to the point that some people didn't even realize it was a brand new console. Some people really believed that that was just a tablet attachment for the Wii. It was just this entire mess, and I think one of the best things that they could do here is to just take a page out of PlayStation's book and just call their next console Nintendo Switch 2. It's very simple, it's very to the point, and it clearly tells you that it is a successor. They really don't need to get fancy with the name. Don't call it a new Nintendo Switch like they did with the new Nintendo 3DS. What a ridiculous name that was. Make it simple and to the point, just simply Nintendo Switch 2. And that is the other major part about this. I do believe that they need to stick with the hybrid console approach and then make the Nintendo Switch 2 backwards compatible. I cannot stress just how important it is for them to have backwards compatible games for the Nintendo Switch successor. I mean, you're talking about one of the most popular consoles of all time, and by bringing that library of games over to their successor, that would be absolutely huge. That is actually one of my favorite things about the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series, so they definitely need to do that in order to keep fans into their ecosystem. Now, that's actually the last part here, because I do think that they need to strengthen their ecosystem. This is something that I feel like Nintendo doesn't necessarily do a great job with, but they need to find new ways to keep people within their ecosystem. And I think one great way of doing this is what Xbox and PlayStation already are doing, and that is by having an achievement or trophy system. Of course, backwards compatibility definitely helps, and if you can take your digital library over to the next console, that's fantastic. But I think trophies and achievements are a great selling point as well, and it's really mind-blowing that Nintendo has yet to do this. But I have had some people just flat out tell me they decided to buy a game on Xbox or PlayStation instead of Nintendo simply because there was no achievements or trophies. So I do think that Nintendo needs to finally cave in and bring an achievement system over to Nintendo. If they do those things, though, I think that that would definitely strengthen their relationship with fans. Regardless, it definitely seems like they are thinking long and hard about the Nintendo Switch successor. They are being more open about it, interestingly enough, as well. And I guess we'll just have to kind of wait and see what happens from here. Let me know what you think about all of this in the comments below, though. What would you like to see with a Nintendo Switch successor? On to our last topic of the day, though. It's starting to sound like Xbox might have some plans beyond the Xbox Bethesda showcase that will be taking place next month on June 12th. According to Jez Corden over on the Xbox 2 podcast, he said this: "I have heard that they will be at Gamescom this year. They'll have a presence because Gamescom actually has an in-person event this year. Maybe they will save something for Gamescom." Okay, so this kind of indicates that Xbox might be going back to their old strategy where they have that big June event where they reveal most of their games there. But then a couple of months later, they might have a couple of surprises for Gamescom as well. Now, Jez Corden didn't seem like he was entirely sure about that. This is what he's hearing, but for the time being, of course, always take this with a grain of salt. It's just a rumor for the time being. But something else that we had heard here recently was actually from Rand al'Thor. Rand al'Thor stated that he had heard that almost every Xbox game studio submitted something for their June event next month. Now, keep in mind, and we talked about this before, but that does not mean that every single studio will have something to show next month at the Xbox Bethesda Showcase. Submitting something doesn't necessarily translate into a reveal. Xbox is going to kind of pick and choose what they want to show next month. But what this does tell you is that these studios that they have acquired in recent years, they're getting closer to releasing their games. So because they have a lot of games in development and because they're getting closer to release, Xbox kind of has the luxury right now that they can hold on to some game announcements and kind of space this out a little bit. So with this news here, it does sound like that there might be a possibility that Xbox might be saving some announcements for Gamescom as well, which will be this August. And of course, you also have the Game Awards later this year, and while we're not hearing anything about that just yet, again, I wouldn't be all that surprised if Xbox has a presence there as well. So with that in mind, even outside of the Xbox Bethesda Showcase, it sounds like you Xbox fans out there, you have a lot to look forward to in 2022, as there might be some pretty major announcements throughout this year. Let's go ahead and take a look at the poll of the day, though, and since we are talking about all these showcases in June, I thought I would ask you all, do you think PlayStation will have some type of showcase next month in June? And you all seem very split on this, with 44% of you saying yes, while 45% of you said no. And this kind of echoes my thoughts on this topic as well, because I'm really not entirely sure. I want to believe that PlayStation will have a showcase next month in June. We do know for a fact that there are still unannounced events, but PlayStation is pretty unpredictable when it comes to this type of stuff anymore. Now, I think that we can kind of peg Nintendo in for next month because they've had a Nintendo Direct in June for years, even though they really didn't have to. With them doing their own digital events, they really didn't have to put those events in the month of June next to E3. But with PlayStation, they've gotten away from E3 here in recent years, and they didn't do showcases during June. So they're definitely unpredictable here, but I'm really crossing my fingers that they do have that big showcase next month. There are a lot of questions about some of their upcoming games. Obviously, God of War Ragnarok. We want to know an official release date for that game. Final Fantasy 16. We've been hearing news that we will get a trailer sometime here soon. Maybe that could show up at a PlayStation event. Then there's also some rumors going around about a new Sly Cooper game. I'm definitely hoping that that one is true. And there's also a lot of studios that we know are working on games and are pretty far along in development, but we don't know what those games are officially just yet. So hopefully we will get that big PlayStation showcase sometime here soon where they can answer a lot of those questions, hopefully this June. Though, like you all, I'm just not 100% certain just because of how unpredictable they are, but definitely crossing my fingers for a June PlayStation event. Anyways, though, that's it for this episode, but if you liked the video, don't forget to hit the notification and subscribe button for more content just like this. Also, if you'd like to support the channel through Patreon, thank you for making this content possible. Peace out.